Welcome, I'm JK Maisie, certified sex and porn addiction recovery coach, founder of Elevated Recovery and the Porn Reboot Addiction Recovery Systems. Thank you so much for joining me today. The first thing I'd like to say is that I truly appreciate the courage it takes to make such an investment in your life. And I just want to thank you sincerely for trusting me with this aspect of your life. It probably took a lot for you to reach out and ask for help and to step out despite the shame and guilt that may be holding you back. I've been where you are. I didn't end up here by accident. I made a very conscious choice after struggling with my out of control behavior for well over a decade to spend the rest of my life helping men end their out of control sexual behavior. What I've done with this lifestyle course is created the course that I wish I had. Like you, I developed habits and I used willpower, which helped me stay away from my out of control behavior with pornography and masturbation for short stretches of time. So I would engage in 90-day challenges of abstinence. I would end up staying off pornography in some cases for many months, especially when I had had a particularly bad binge where I was filled with so much regret. Unfortunately, I inevitably ended up back in that dark place where I started. And I realized that even though I'd read so many books and gone through so many courses on habit change, nothing was going to change unless my lifestyle changed. Don't get me wrong, I tried everything else. I tried therapy. I tried 12 steps. I tried to find the root cause of my behavior. But guess what? All of these modalities, while they're great in and of themselves, all of them are built on a foundation of certain habits. But if you don't make those habits a lifestyle, then you're not going to benefit from them. And so I realized that the one thing I needed to change, the missing piece, was lifestyle. I needed to create a lifestyle that I could stick with effortlessly until my self-image changed, until I became the sort of man who didn't need to view pornography. Think about it. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, when I was growing up, I wet the bed a lot. In fact, this is probably embarrassing to say on camera and put out there for so many people to hear, but I wet the bed till I was about 10 years old. And then, at one point, I stopped wetting the bed. Now, I don't remember why I stopped, but what I do remember is that I lived in fear of wetting the bed for the first 10 years of my life. And it's horrible as a 10-year-old to still wet your bed. But despite that deep fear, when I got into my teens, I just no longer experienced it anymore. And if somebody would ask me right now, well, JK, like, why don't you wet the bed? Because I'm not the kind of guy who does that. I know this sounds simplistic, but I want you to consider ending your out of control sexual behavior with pornography and masturbation the same way you would wetting your bed when you were a kid. If someone were to ask you right now, well, aren't you afraid that you're going to wet your bed? It should be the same as if they were asking you, aren't you afraid you're going to get back to porn or masturbation? The answer will be no. I'm an adult. I'm not that kind of person. It is not a part of my self-image. And that's exactly the way I want you to feel, because that's exactly the system I needed. That's the system I created. My hope is that through this journey, you experience the peace of mind, the relief, the freedom from shame and guilt, and the excitement that comes with knowing that you're finally able to accomplish your potential. You know what it's like. There's so many things in life that you know you could do, whether it's in your relationship, whether it's with your physical health, maybe it's with your finances, maybe there's this dream career you want to engage in. Maybe you see yourself as being a more social person, a person who is attractive to others. But you know deep within you that there's one thing holding you back, and it is your inability to shake this habit. It's your inability to get rid of this out of control behavior, and it's the thing that's throwing you off. It does not matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how long you've been living with this. The purpose of this is to get you to feel that you are done with it. I was exposed to pornography at the age of 8 years old when I found a pornographic comic strip that was kept by my nanny, who was taking care of my sisters and I under her bed. And by the time I was 14 years old, I was introduced to internet pornography by someone who was close to me, a close friend of mine. Unfortunately for me, I wasn't one of the guys who was able to just watch it and entertain myself, I found myself using pornography to medicate every issue I had in my life. When I thought that I was unattractive because I had a lot of acne, well, pornography made me feel better. When I got rejected by a girl in high school, I ran back to pornography. When I was just not sure of what I wanted to do in life, when I got into teenage arguments with my parents, I ran to pornography. And unfortunately, I ended up using pornography to medicate every major aspect of my life. By the time I was in my early 20s, pornography ruled my life. I was not dating anyone. I was doing horribly in school. I was depending on alcohol and weed to build a social life. I couldn't even engage in any sort of social activity unless I was on some sort of substance. And that severely impacted my life. It wasn't until I was in my mid-20s that I was able to end this behavior and undo the damage that years and years of porn addiction had wreaked in my life. Although it took me years to control my behavior, years to learn how to create the right lifestyle, years to go back and regain a lot of the skills that I had lost, and even longer to recreate my self-esteem, when I realized that I wasn't the only one going through this problem, when I realized that there were thousands of men out there who were struggling with the exact same thing, I made a very difficult decision. I had spent quite a bit of time trying to build up a career for myself in the sales world. I decided to let all of that go and focus full-time on helping men end this out-of-control behavior. And before I jump into the course, I'd like to share a brief story of one of my clients. And just as I'm speaking about this, his name pops up, and let's call him Mike. Now, Mike was a man who had struggled with an out-of-control behavior till he met me when he was about 39 years old. And he was married to his high school sweetheart. They hadn't had sex. They were in a sexless marriage for 5 years. And every day Mike would work, he would come back, and because there was no intimacy with his wife, he would tell her that he was going to work late at his office. He would go into the office, and all he would do all evening was view pornography, get on video chats with other women, and masturbate. So he was struggling. He had all sorts of issues. He had porn-induced erectile dysfunction. He was in a marriage that wasn't working, and he was beginning to have some serious health issues. When Mike met me, he tried to stay off pornography for a while. He went to some groups, but he found them a little bit weird, and he wasn't really comfortable with the idea of a higher power and giving your power away. He'd work with therapists, but he'd also had some bad experiences where he felt that therapists focused a little bit too much on the root cause and not on the actual issues that were affecting his life in that moment. As he told me in his own words, "JK, these are great conversations and I learn a lot about myself with the therapist. But it doesn't matter if I'm going to come back, lock the door, and spend the evening with some random woman on the internet instead of my wife who's upstairs." And I totally understood where he was coming from because I'd done the same thing. Well, Mike had built some good habits. Mike had decent willpower. His only problem was that he had quit believing in his ability to stay away from this behavior. You might be feeling the same way. You might feel that the only way to do this is to either go the 12-step route where you have to accept and identify as an addict and live this way for the rest of your life, or keep using willpower and stay off this behavior for a couple of weeks or a couple of months and then go back to it. I'm here to tell you that it doesn't have to be that way. Mike couldn't believe it when I told him that. And I told him, "You've got the habits, let's not worry about that. But I'm going to show you how to change your lifestyle. When you live this lifestyle long enough, it's going to change your self-image. You will no longer see yourself as a man who views pornography. And in that process, your brain is going to rewire. You're going to develop new coping skills and strategies for dealing with the things that you use pornography to medicate, and your life is going to be transformed." 2 years later, Mike has full control of his out-of-control behavior. He's 40 years old right now. His health is better than it's ever been. And about a year and a half into the program, Mike announced within our coaching group that he had finally been able to have sex with his wife. And to be honest with you, that was probably the biggest victory for him, because this was a man who, despite everything, he refused to step out on his relationship. Like you, Mike is a good man. And I want to emphasize this because that's one of the things I told him. You might be sitting there thinking that you're a horrible person, or that you're not worthy of love, or that some of the things you've watched or some of the behaviors you've engaged in that you can never forgive yourself for. I know that I did, and I watched things that I swore I would not share till I went to my grave. And I have released all those things. It's my hope that you do the same thing. Mike completely transformed his life. He saved his marriage. He's now like active in so many things. This was a dude who was like overweight when he joined our program. At the end of it, he's doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He has like a great YouTube channel. You can't find him because his name is not really Mike. And he's doing so well. He's doing so well for himself. And so my hope is that you become your version of Mike. Mike is living his best life. He's pushing his potential. And I want you to do the same. Enough said. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Get ready for a transformative journey that will mark a brand new stage in your life. I'll see you on the next module. Welcome. Today we're going to be talking about what exactly a recovery or reboot lifestyle is. So what is the goal or destination which you are moving towards? You know, breaking your addictive habits with pornography, sex, or masturbation can be difficult. Building the right habits can be challenging. And many men find themselves being able to control their behavior and change their habits for short amounts of time before ultimately slipping or relapsing. This prevents you from enjoying the happiness and peace of mind which you ultimately hoped for. And one of the reasons why this happens is because the positive habits which were built up have not been turned into a lifestyle. And there is this very natural tendency to aim for a life of abstinence, and I know you've heard that word, from our sexual behavior instead. As a certified sex and porn addiction recovery coach, I've dealt with men struggling to overcome this behavior for about a decade, and for a much longer period of time, I've controlled my sexual behavior. Over the years, I've heard a lot of comments from men, things like, you know what, JK, I'm off porn and masturbation, but dude, I'm miserable as hell. I've stayed away from acting out sexually. I've stayed away from escorts, from chat sites, from massage parlors. That's not my problem anymore. My question is, when do I get to be happy? My girlfriend or my wife still feels that I have behaviors from the past, and she worries that I could slip anytime. And you know what? She's right. I still objectify women. I still check out women. And sometimes she catches me doing that. And I don't want to live that way. Or honestly, I feel like I'm just white knuckling it through the process of ending this behavior. And sometimes the spouses of men who are ending this behavior reach out to me and they tell me that, you know, I thought everything would be great when my husband stopped watching pornography and he used willpower to end it. But the truth is, we now seem further apart than we ever were. And I'm not sure it was worth the wait. Now, that's a pretty damning thing to hear. You know, the more often I hear this, the more I realize that abstinence is often mistaken for a recovery lifestyle. But abstinence from compulsive sexual behaviors is still abstinence. All addictive habits and behaviors lead to a loss of self-esteem and integrity. And this loss impacts many other aspects of your life: your health, your social life, your relationships, your finances, even your spiritual life. Eventually, your self-image, your concept of who and what you are, is damaged. Restoring your self-image is a critical component of permanent recovery. In order to do this, you have to maintain a recovery lifestyle long enough to experience positive change, which results in a self-image which is now whole. And that is exactly what this course is going to do for you. In the next session, I'm going to be talking about the importance of defining your recovery and sharing the subtle difference between the terms recovery and reboot. Welcome to today's session. We're going to be talking about defining your recovery lifestyle. But before we get into that, I'd like to make a quick differentiation between the term reboot and the term recovery. Now, recovery has been a term which has been around for quite a long time. And it's often related to ending out of control behavior through a very specific process. But the difference that I'd like to share today is much less about semantics and more about mindset. Recovery, when we hear the word as it's defined, means to recover parts of your life that were lost to this addiction. This includes your relationships, this includes finances, this includes different aspects of your health, your spirituality, certain beliefs and dreams that you might have. The only problem is that whatever you recover through a traditional system, through a traditional therapist, through a 12-step group, is going to be based on where society believes that you should be at that time. But here's something important that is not often considered. During the time where you were engaging in your out of control, compulsive habit or addiction, time passed. You got older. Opportunities passed you by. And so whatever it is that is being recovered is often something that is not the place you want to be. It's where people say you should be. So for instance, it might just be about, let's talk about your finances or dating. Maybe you wanted to enjoy the process of dating, but you missed out on that opportunity because you spent so many years on pornography. However, when you go through the traditional recovery process, you're told that, hey, to be a person who is sober, to be a person who is not engaging in your out of control behavior, you have no choice but to be in a committed relationship. The problem with things like that, and it applies not just to your relationship, it can also apply to your spiritual beliefs, to your finances, and every aspect of your life, is that if that is not where you want to be, and you are forced to be in that role, you are still going to deal with emotions of resentment. You're still going to feel unsatisfied. And this is often one of the reasons why many men end up relapsing. But the traditional recovery systems often don't mention that. Because of course, you should be happy. You should be grateful that you have recovered this life that you lost. That's recovery. Rebooting, on the other hand, implies that you are actually resetting every aspect of your life. Not only are you recovering things, but there are some things from your past life that completely need to be removed. There are certain beliefs that need to be changed. There are limiting beliefs that need to be let go of. There might be new spiritual practices, new paradigms about your finances, new paradigms about emotions, about being vulnerable, about the way you relate to the world. You now have an opportunity to start from scratch. And we're doing this bearing in mind that you have lost so much to this behavior. Maybe you started acting out when you were much younger, in your teens or as a child, and you were held back from so many things. Perhaps you're in your late 20s, your 30s, your 40s, it doesn't matter what age you are. I know, because I did, that you have the regret of all those opportunities you missed. Why spend years trying to get them back when you can simply hit the restart button and start from where you are today? There is no reason for you to live in the past. And I want to make this clear distinction because it's so important when you hear me say the word reboot. Recovery is wonderful, and I also understand that the reboot thing is not for everyone. So as we go through this course, you're going to hear me use the terms interchangeably. I just want to make it clear what both of those terms mean. Welcome to today's session. Today we're going to be talking about how to define your recovery or your reboot. So how do you do this? Now, if you're following this course, or if you are simultaneously participating in some other program to control an out of control behavior, it is very important to know this. So before we move forward, please take a moment, get a pen or a pencil and some paper to write out your definition of recovery or rebooting. Because without a definition, it's like going to an airline ticket counter at an airport, being asked like, where do you want to go? And your answer is anywhere away from here. Now, this might sound like simplistic, but think of how you originally defined ending your compulsive behavior, and you'll find that it makes sense. When I ask my clients these questions, I get responses like, Recovery or rebooting is peace of mind, or it's freedom, or it's liking myself again. But these are too general. Actually, they are more statements than answers. If we go back to the airline example, it's similar to describing your destination as, well, I guess I want to go somewhere warm and sunny. Well, guess what? You can't get a ticket to go anywhere like that. So in order to move forward, you do have to ask some very specific questions, right? I'll give you some examples if you've got your pen and paper. If you haven't, pause this and get one. What gives you peace? Think about it. Or what has robbed you of peace in the past? Or if you want peace of mind, you want to ask yourself, is perfect peace of mind even possible? If you don't like yourself and you have a lot of self-loathing, you can ask yourself, well, why don't I like myself? Or if you had control of your behavior in life, would you be happy or just less worried about losing this precious control? Or another deeper one, which I want you to think about, is it really your life you want to control or someone else's? For instance, are you ending this behavior for yourself, or are you doing it because your wife is threatening to leave? My suggestion is that you take your time defining your reboot or your recovery, right? So what does it mean to you? For instance, where do you want to go ultimately? Where do you want to end up? Think about this. Write these down. My suggestion is that you take your time. What does recovery or rebooting really mean to you? Where do you want to go? What do you want different aspects of your life to look like? What does your ideal relationship look like? What does your ideal evening look like? And I mean this because many men end their evenings with guilt and regret. What do you want your ideal morning to look like? What do you want it to feel like when you wake up in the morning knowing that it's a Saturday morning and you didn't make any silly decisions on Friday night? What do you want your bank account to look like? So take a moment to describe your reboot or recovery. Define it as being an aspect of your perfect life. Remember what I talked about when it came to recovery and it came to rebooting. Now you can choose to go either way. I lean more towards the reboot, but if you choose to go recovery, well, what are the things you want to regain in your life? What are the things you want to bring back? What would it look like? And if you choose to go the reboot route and you choose to think a little bit bigger, a little bit more adventurous, then think about what are the new things that you want to have in your life. Don't worry about whether rebooting or recovery is the right path. The most important thing is that you control your out of control sexual behavior. And this is just the first step to changing your lifestyle for the better. When we define recovery or rebooting, there are a few other things that we're also defining, such as exactly what the issue is, and we're also defining what needs to be done about the issue. In addition to that, we've also got to think about what is the actual system that we are using and what is that going to accomplish. Now, I want to make one thing clear when it comes to systems. No system can take you further than your own definition of your recovery or reboot. I'll say it again. No system can take you further than your definition of your recovery or your reboot. Very few people define their recovery or their reboot in a very specific way. And as a result, they don't identify the central issue in their life. And they have no idea where a system is actually supposed to take them. I'll give you an example. Let's say we ask 100 men who are addicted to compulsively watching pornography and compulsively masturbating what recovery or reboot from this habit is. A majority of them will say staying off porn and masturbation, right? So given that definition, that staying off porn and masturbation is recovery or rebooting, that means that the problem or the issue is watching porn and masturbating. And what to do about it is not watch porn and masturbate. And then that leads you to the next rational thing, which is the system I will use will then take me to abstinence from porn and masturbation. But listen, if porn and masturbation is the problem and not watching porn and masturbating is the solution, then everything should be all right when porn and masturbation is out of the picture, right? You name the problem, you take away the problem, then you have no problem, right? Wrong. That isn't the case, and that's the reason why so many people are unsuccessful in ending this behavior. I've had a few clients who followed this line of thinking. It's natural. Sure enough, they did stay away from porn and masturbation, sometimes for months, on occasion for about a year, and then they experienced strong withdrawal symptoms. The process was very stressful because they weren't going towards anything. They were just going away from pain, and they often inevitably found themselves back in that very habit which they escaped. Where this system takes you depends entirely on how you define your recovery or your reboot. Not how your friend describes it or defines it, not how a 12-step group defines it, not how your therapist, your coach, or your pastor defines it. So think again about your definition of your reboot or your recovery and write it down on that piece of paper. And brother, once you're done, we're going to proceed to the next session where we'll talk about the stages of your reboot or your recovery. We're going to walk you through every stage from the early stage all the way to the point where all you're doing is just maintaining this behavior. This is very important. It's sort of like a map so that you can have a bird's eye view of what the process is like. I'll also share how long it's going to take you to get from point A to point B, because that's what a system does. A system is predictable and it is reliable, and there's a clear path to get from one end to the other with benchmarkers where you can measure your progress. I'll see you on the next session. In the previous session, we spoke about the importance of defining your recovery or your reboot. The next thing to be aware of is the different stages that you're going to be going through. Altogether, there are 5 stages, and I'm going to share how to identify where you are and also how to figure out when you're ready to move on to the next stage. Now, bear in mind, using our system, it does take about 1.5 years to 2 years to progress through all the stages. But I don't want you to worry about that. You're not going to be using willpower. It's not going to be a drag. The purpose of this course is to make all these stages a part of your lifestyle. And in this session, we're going to begin with stage 1, which is known as the pre-reboot or the pre-recovery stage. The pre-reboot stage is the point where you haven't quite started the actual reboot or recovery process, but you are taking the first steps towards finally controlling your behavior. I'm going to share some of the keys to success for this stage. And I like to look at stage 1 as a stage that has 3 simple goals to accomplish in order for you to move on to the next stage. The first is you begin to recognize your compulsive behavior. There is no more denial. Secondly, you agree to learn how to control this behavior. And finally, you learn how to manage your withdrawal symptoms and any crises that brought you into a program like this. And to accomplish these goals, there are a few things you need. You need hope, you need trust, and you need to allow others to help you. And it's okay if these things don't come naturally to you. Most men who arrive at a program like this came feeling isolated, but self-sufficient. Most of us as men insist that we can handle things on our own. But if you want to beat your out of control behavior, you're going to need some help. And hope is the first key to success, because without hope, why would you even bother trying the system out? Allowing others to help and support you is the next key to success. Now, you probably haven't told anyone about your out of control behavior yet. And if you have, it's probably a close friend or two who you feel won't judge you. But you do need to allow a wider range of people in to support you through the reboot or the recovery process. Now, personally, before I started my reboot, I thought I was the only man dealing with this problem for so many years, and I carried that secret for too long. So much shame and guilt for not being able to control my sexual behavior. Now, imagine my relief when I finally discovered that there were so many men who struggled with the same problem. I no longer felt alone. I no longer felt isolated or weird. I was surrounded by men who understood. Now, I understand how challenging it is to allow people to help you at first. And I didn't want to let anyone in when I first started because of the shame I felt. I was used to handling things on my own, as you probably are. But the truth is, you're not going to be able to deal with this problem alone. We are human beings. We are not lone wolves, and you cannot progress past stage 1 of your reboot or recovery until you allow others to help you. And finally, trust is the key that ties everything together. You need to trust that a system can work for you, and you need to trust those who are helping you. Now, you don't need to start with all the faith in the world. I'd like you to experience a few wins as you go through this program, and then you'll see that we truly support you through the process. So a quick summary. In order for you to move on from stage 1 to stage 2 is called the early reboot or early recovery. You do have to accept the fact that you have a compulsive, out of control sexual behavior. You have to learn how to deal with and identify different withdrawal symptoms. And finally, you do have to have hope and trust in the system. Now, in the next session, I'll be talking about the early reboot or early recovery process. So the first stage of the system involves recognizing your problem and your need for help, as well as developing hope and trust in a system. And once you begin to experience withdrawals and you begin learning how to manage these systems, you're then ready to move on to stage 2. Now, stage 2 is where you complete the process of cognitively and emotionally processing the situations that brought you into this system. So perhaps you were struggling with something like porn-induced erectile dysfunction. This is an erectile dysfunction that is brought about by compulsively viewing pornography, where you are unable to have or maintain an erection without viewing or fantasizing about pornography. Throughout the rest of these sessions, I'll be referring to porn-induced erectile dysfunction as PIED. So maybe you were struggling with that and it affected your intimacy with your partner. Or perhaps there was some porn-induced infidelity and your relationship has reached a crisis point. Maybe you spent a lot of money, maybe you lost something important to you, or you will let go of your job due to your out-of-control sexual behavior. Now, whatever the crisis is, stage 2 is where we finish processing it. We work through the stressors that brought you here and we get you to a place where you can start logically going through the program. So the keys to success for this stage are very much similar to stage 1. There are a few crucial goals that you have to accomplish to be successful in stage 2. The first one is you have to keep accepting your behavior. At stage 2, this is really where denial kicks in. At stage 1, you did accept that you have this behavior, but as you start putting in the work at stage 2, that's when you begin to experience denial. You'll start hearing yourself say things like, do I really need to do this? Oh my God, this is going to take work. I have to rearrange my schedule to sit down and watch this video or to visit with this therapist or to speak with these mentors. That's why you have to come back to accepting your behavior. The second criteria is accepting that you can actually create and live a new life. And the final one is learning the coping skills and strategies that you would use instead of pornography, masturbation, or any out-of-control sexual behavior you might be struggling in. So let's take a little bit more of an in-depth look into what each of these goals are. The first one is accepting your behavior. And this involves letting go of a lot of the old ideas that you might have about pornography addiction and the recovery process, as well as accepting the fact that you have this problem. Maybe you picked up these beliefs from a 12-step group, or you tried to work through some issues with a therapist. There are other methods to recovery out there, but we have a very specific way of approaching it with our clients. For example, one of the things that you need to let go of is the habit of counting days, and it's something a lot of men do. However, I don't feel it's helpful for several reasons. The first reason is that when you count down days, you're counting towards a very specific ideal. And that ideal, when it comes to your sexual behavior, is something that is created in your head and placed on a pedestal. What often happens is that a man tells himself something like, you know what, 90 days from now, I am going to have total control over my behavior. I'm no longer going to struggle with PIED, porn-induced erectile dysfunction, and my relationship with my wife is going to be great. I will no longer experience any shame or any guilt. So he counts down every day as he goes through whatever program it is till he gets to day 90. Well, what if he gets to day 90 and he's accomplished some of these things, but he still struggles with PIED? He still doesn't have a great relationship with his wife because he realizes now that it takes two to make that work. And let's say he still carries a little bit of shame and guilt. Well, it's likely he's going to relapse because he put in so much work and used so much willpower and counted on all these days, hoping that there was going to be some big reward at the end. And when you don't experience that, well, it's a letdown. and you already know how you typically deal with letdowns in your life. So that's one of the reasons why we don't encourage counting within our system. Another mindset to change in stage 2 is the idea that this is an all or nothing situation. So some men come in thinking that they should never slip, not even once, and that if they do so, it's all over. So they end up beating themselves up, they throw in the towel, not understanding how detrimental this behavior is to their reboots. We like to use the phrase progress over perfection as you go through your reboots. It is okay if you slip once in a while. That does not undo the rewiring to your brain. These are just a few of the mindsets that stand in the way of your accepting your behavior. And I understand that it can be challenging to rewire your brain after carrying around these ideas for years, but it is critical if you want to be successful in your reboot or your recovery. Finally, you do have to accept that you can live a new life to progress through stage 2. And a lot of men arrive here feeling exhausted and defeated. I remember what it was like for me. This is probably not the first method you've tried, or maybe it is, but compulsive masturbation and pornography addiction are difficult conditions to live with, and they wear you down, and they wear down the people in your life who are affected by your behavior. And oftentimes, you may believe that you're beyond the point of help when you get here. But I promise you that you can live a new life. You can find freedom and relief from your compulsive sexual behavior. But until you accept that you can live a new life, your false beliefs are going to hold you back. In an upcoming session, I'm going to share a little bit more about how you can start believing more in this lifestyle. Finally, there's the process of overcoming denial. And stage 2, as I mentioned earlier, is where denial begins to creep in. Even after you accept your behavior and the fact that you can overcome it and the fact that you can create a new life, at some point you might feel that this was just some big overreaction to a simple problem. You start wondering whether you made a big deal out of nothing, or you start feeling some shame creeping in and you want to deny that you ever had a problem in the first place. This is important. I know I sound like I'm beating a dead horse, but the last thing I want you to do is quit this program before you get to the next stage. So once you've accepted that you can live a new life, once you've truly accepted that you're dealing with this behavior, and finally, once you've handled that second wave of denial that's going to come up during the second stage, you'll be ready for stage 3. And stage 3 is known as the mid-reboot or the mid-recovery. That's what we're going to be talking about next. I'll see you on the next session. Welcome to session 3. In the previous session, we spoke about stage 2, which is your early reboots. Today, we're going to talk about stage 3. Now, stage 3 can be considered to be the midway point where you've already made a commitment to your long-term reboot or recovery, and you're ready to start taking action. So one of the first things that we focused on earlier was helping you recognize and take control of your behaviors and habits. Then you moved into a place of acceptance of your problem and the fact that you can overcome it. So now it's time to move into taking more action. And you're at a point where you know you're heading in a new direction, but it can also be overwhelming at stage 3 because you're moving away from everything you've known. And the way we help you through this is by addressing and developing a new approach to your lifestyle. And this process starts during stage 3. Let's start with some of your goals for this stage. The first goal would be developing a brand new identity as a man. The second will be balancing areas of what we call your reboot or recovery capital, which is a very, very important part of this lifestyle course. So how are you going to go ahead and accomplish these things? When it comes to developing a new identity, you can consider the mid-reboot as the beginning of your new life. Like, sure, you've made some progress during stage 1 and stage 2, but a lot of that was about acceptance. Even though you need recognition and acceptance, you're not going to make any progress if you don't take action. And step 3 is the place where all that action actually begins. As I mentioned earlier, if you want to be successful in your reboot or recovery, you have to create a new identity. And this is where I ran into some problems with some of the other approaches out there that you might be familiar with. such as 12-step groups. Now, in the 12-step groups, you develop a new identity, but that identity centers entirely around the recovery program. So your identity becomes that of a recovered addict, like, hello, my name is JK and I'm an addict. So you see, my identity is based on my past behavior. And what that does is that it keeps you tied to that behavior. It takes a lot of effort to change your identity. So what we do in a program like ours is we make sure that it is centered, your identity is centered around being a successful individual. In the past, you may have been introverted, angry, or a loner. Maybe you lack control over your emotions, or you always felt stressed out and overwhelmed, or you simply blamed everything on your high sex drive. But after moving through stage 1 and stage 2, you now realize that that was all brought about by your compulsive behavior. So now it's time to develop a new identity. Now, I'm not going to give you a new identity though, and neither is this system. Instead, what I'm going to do is guide you along the path to developing your own identity based on a new self-image. And your self-image is your personal idea of who and what you are. I don't need you to become a carbon copy of everybody else who goes through this program. So we're going to focus on the things that makes you a successful individual in your own right. The next key to success to getting through stage 3 is balancing different areas of what we call your reboot capital. Now, earlier on, you heard me mention the term reboot or recovery capital. Now, just like a new business owner needs capital, a certain amount of cash resources in order to start and maintain a business before that business becomes profitable, a man who is rebooting or a man who is going through the recovery process needs similar amounts of capital in different domains of his life. And the reason why he needs this is that through the process of your out of control sexual behavior, you are depleted in different areas of your life. And you know what areas that you're struggling in. For some, it might be that your relationship is falling apart. For others, you might not know how to identify certain emotions, or you might be numb to certain emotions. For others, your health might not be the best due to your out of control behavior. And for others, this might have affected you financially. And so one of the things that we do in stage 3 is identify the areas of your life where we need to build up capital in, and we begin to work on that. As you can see, this system isn't just about controlling your out of control behavior. It's also about becoming a better person as a whole. It's a holistic approach. And so building and balancing different areas of your reboot capital is a key part of this process. Balancing your reboot capital is not a one-time thing though. It's an ongoing process throughout your reboots. But stage 3 is where you actually start identifying those areas in your life, the areas where you want to invest in your reboot capital. And you might find that spending dedicated time in the gym every day is an aspect that strengthens your physical reboots. Maybe you enjoy building out a deeper morning routine, something we like to call recovery time, where you get centered for the day, where you anchor yourself for that day. Or you might find that spending time with people who share common interests is something that helps you feel stronger in your reboots. Stage 3 is also the time for you to explore various areas of your life that you neglected before. It's about finding which parts make you feel most like yourself and incorporating these into your new identity. Stage 3 is about starting the process of balancing these different areas instead of becoming too invested in any one part. The next key to success in stage 3 is recognizing the potential for relapse. So stage 3, your mid-reboot, is when the opportunity to relapse becomes a reality. Relapsing at any point during stage 1 and 2 is always a possibility, but you're still early in the process. Stage 3 is when you start making forward progress, which increases the impact of relapses on your life. And understanding the causes of relapses that arise at this point can be very helpful. The next key to success to stage 3 is understanding withdrawals. Now, men using this system usually experience withdrawal symptoms during the first 6 weeks. That's when they have the tendency to be most intense. Recognizing that you're still in the withdrawal phase will help you become a lot more aware of potential relapses. The next key to success in stage 3 is behavior change. Now, you're going to experience significant behavioral changes during the first 2 months of using this program. And honestly, sometimes it's hard for your mind to keep up with a lot of the incredible changes that you're making with your behavior. So often, your self image can't keep up. And what I mean is that you're still going to sometimes see yourself or perceive yourself as just a guy who still views pornography, even when in reality, as you go through this program, your behavior doesn't match up with that mindset. And that's okay. Just be aware of this at stage 3. And finally, for stage 3, we have social pressure. As you progress through your mid-reboot or mid-stage of your recovery, and you start spending more time with people and coming out of isolation, you might find yourself around people who perhaps aren't the best influence on you. These could be people whom you've been friends with for years. They might not appreciate the drastic changes that you're making in your life. This could create some distance between you and old friends, or perhaps even the loss of these relationships completely. So prepare yourself for the possibility of maybe losing old friends, but recognize that for the most part, you're still moving in the right direction without them. The next stage that we're going to be talking about is stage 4, and stage 4 is known as the late reboot stage. In the previous session, we spoke about stage 3, the mid-reboot. Right now, we're going to be talking about stage 4, which is known as your late reboot. Now, the late reboot is a stage that a lot of men look forward to, and it's a very important stage, so please pay attention. Once you've progressed through stages 1, 2, and 3, the basics are now in place, and you've created a solid routine for yourself throughout the week. Now it's time to dig a little bit deeper. I'd like to think of stage 4 as a stage where you identify, resolve, and stabilize any life issues that are related to your behavior with pornography, sex, or masturbation. And this simply means issues that threw your life off that you couldn't really focus on during the first few stages. So there are some keys to success to stage 4, as with the other stages. And once you're at the point where you've created the right habits, you've built up a semblance of a successful lifestyle, you start noticing other areas of your life that may have atrophied over time. These are things like your social life, your dating life, your financial situation, and repairing these aspects of your life is going to reduce stress and help you build a more well-rounded life. So, what are the best ways for you to address some of these areas of your life that have atrophied, so to speak? Well, the first step would be to learn from people who actually solve those problems in their life. Now, when it comes to fixing other areas in your life, my philosophy is that you should take the quickest route possible. This means finding individuals who have already taken care of the problem that you're struggling with. So you want to consult with people who have seen the movie before, who have faced it and successfully overcome it. And most importantly, they need to know how to teach you to overcome it as well. And again, this isn't just about your reboot or your recovery. This means finding people who are experts at relationships, at managing finances, and even fitness. So find an expert in the area where you're having a hard time and seek their guidance. You can find coaches, you can find trainers for just about anything. And there are plenty of qualified individuals out there who are available to help. Now, I do understand that a lot of men shy away from this because it was probably a big step for you to become a part of a program like this. And I also know that there's this belief that if you ask somebody for help, you're weak or you're needy, or if you seek help from somebody, then somehow you're cheating to get out of the hard process. But brother, these are false ideas. They couldn't be further from the truth. Because think about it. Why would you waste your time fumbling around when you can learn from somebody who's been through it before? You want to work smarter, not harder. And these individuals, as I mentioned before, I love the term. I heard it from a mentor of mine, seen the movie before. They're going to help you accomplish your goals, and they're the perfect resource to help you get to where you want to be. Now, I just want to briefly share with you one of my experiences working with a mentor, just to encourage you at this stage. I've worked with many different mentors over the years, each who helped me in a specific area where I struggled. They really did help me save time and avoid making mistakes. I remained teachable, I remained coachable, and their input made a huge difference in my life. One of these was a dating coach by the name of Mark Manson. And early on in my reboot, I realized that even though I was building a strong foundation, one of the areas where I struggled was anxiety and objectification of women. And as a result of this, I had a horrible dating life. Anytime I tried to speak to a woman that I found attractive, my social anxiety would pop up and it would manifest itself as this severe awkwardness. So I was always getting rejected. And what would I do when I got rejected? Well, I would go back home, I would crank on my masturbation station, and I would do what we do best. I realized after going out, drinking to have some liquid courage and talk to women that I wasn't making any progress in this area. But I was reading this gentleman, Mark Manson's, I was reading his blog, and he talked about building confidence socially, going out and speaking to people. And one day I just decided to pull the trigger. I realized that this guy had been through everything I had experienced, and he had his own system. So I flew off to Austin, Texas. I couldn't afford it at the time, to be honest with you, but it was one of the best things I did. And I had to overcome a lot of fear. I thought that maybe what if it doesn't work? What if everything he's talking about on his videos and on his blog, what if they weren't true? But I swallowed my fear. I went there and it was an amazing time. He had me talk to so many strangers. He analyzed everything I did. He showed me how to move forward despite my anxiety. And by the end of that long weekend, my fear of speaking to attractive women was completely gone. And within a year and a half from then, I got into my first successful relationship. When I say successful relationship, I mean that by December this year, I would have been with this person for 13 years. And none of this would have happened if I did not, at that stage of my reboot and recovery, find a mentor who was an expert in that area. The next key to success for stage 4 is beginning the process of personality change. So as you begin to change your self-image, your personality is going to follow suit. Some people might push back at this change, but I want you to know that there's nothing wrong with this. A lot of men are very attached to their personalities at first, and as a recovering porn addict, though, you're quickly going to realize that certain personality traits are no longer beneficial to carry with you moving forward. And the goal here is to create a positive change in your personality. This doesn't mean that you're going to change your entire personality. Don't worry about that. You're just going to focus on certain traits, identify them, and then leave behind those that are no longer serving you, and in the process, adopt better alternatives. So like developing your identity, your personality shift will continue throughout the later stages of your reboot as well. The next key to success for stage 4 is developing healthy relationships. Your personality change at this stage comes about as you begin to learn how to trust yourself. And along with this comes the ability to start developing healthy relationships. You're beginning to recognize how relationships work, from platonic friendships to romantic partnerships. For instance, you'll learn how to develop healthy intimacy with women. Sometimes you've likely struggled with this for years due to your behavior with pornography. Pornography doesn't teach you how to be intimate. You may have started this process during one of the earlier stages, but the later stages of your reboot, like stage 4, are where you really start to hit your stride when it comes to developing relationships. At this point, you have control over your sexual behavior, and you've started working through a lot of your unresolved issues. You have a stronger sense of self-esteem, you have more self-confidence, and your reboot capital in general is higher than it's ever been. Your relationships are no longer based on a sense of neediness. You begin to enter relationships with a sense of comfort with yourself. The next key to success to stage 4, the late stage of your reboot, is learning how to express your feelings. Now, pornography and masturbation often served as a tool for you to avoid your feelings for years. And if you weren't doing that, you were using porn and masturbation to medicate strong feelings. Now that you've gotten rid of that tool, your feelings have returned and you're learning how to handle them. It's often an uncomfortable but necessary part of the process to overcoming your behavior with pornography and masturbation. Stage 4 is where you begin to start working on being vulnerable, being open, and being honest in relationships in ways that you never were before. And it's an ongoing process, like many other parts of this system. You're not going to be forthcoming with your feelings all at once, though. You'll learn how to shed the unnecessary layers one at a time. So it's a process that's going to take a little bit of time. Next, when it comes to a key to success to stage 4, is learning how to take risks. Now, I'm not talking about the same type of risks that you took when you were acting out with your compulsive behavior sexually. I mean taking emotional risks, which is in many cases more scary. I'm talking about the risk of being hurt by being vulnerable, the risk of being hurt by sharing your feelings. Another one of these risks is a loss of traditional structure in your life. So you became used to doing the same thing year after year, trapped in this negative downward spiral of your addiction. And now you're moving away from that. You're moving away from that old structure and you're letting go of patterns that no longer work for you. And this can be risky because you're very used to that. So at stage 4, you're stripping away the unhelpful parts of that old structure. You're stripping it away and you're rebuilding your life. As you do so, you want to make sure that you're making room for new things. You'll also be interacting with your friends differently. You'll be a lot more engaged with your partner. You'll be trying new activities. You'll be experiencing things that you wouldn't have before. And all of this might feel like a big risk, but you'll learn how to sit with it a little bit more. In the past, when you experience risks in your life, it was similar to going to a train station and getting on the train and then just going down the path to acting out sexually. What happens at stage 4 is we train you how to go to the train station, but instead of getting on the train, you actually just sit and you watch the train pass by. Then you sit and you watch the next train pass by. You're no longer getting on that train. You're no longer riding the risk to a place that you would regret. Once you've made your way through these benchmarks at stage 4, you'll be finally approaching the last stage of your reboot, stage 5, which is aptly named the maintenance stage. So if you've stuck with me so far, I'll see you on the next session where we speak about this final stage. In the previous session, we spoke about stage 4, which is the late stage of your reboots. Today, we're going to speak about the final stage, stage 5, and I refer to this as the maintenance stage of your reboot or your recovery. At this point, you've accepted your need for help, you've implemented new habits, you're integrated into some form of a supportive community, and you're on a track that actually works for you. Your focus now is to maintain what you've built so far and continue to make small adjustments to keep growing in your recovery and to keep growing as this new person that you've become. And as you settle into stage 5, it's also important to remind yourself that this is a new lifestyle. So what you thought of as your porn or sex addiction was actually a long-term lifestyle that you spent months or years living. And as you settle into your new approach to life, you have to remember the things that brought you here in the first place. It takes time for your brain to rewire. So even after you have your new routine in place, understand that it takes about 6 months to a year to discover what works for you and to build habits around those different things. Then you spend the next year building up reboot capital using the tools that we've shared with you that'll be making a difference in your life. And overall, it takes about 1.5 to 2 years for a man's brain to fully rewire from an out of control sexual behavior. And even though it might take a shorter time for some men to progress from habit change to lifestyle change to changing your self-image, the full process is going to take about 1.5 to 2 years. So this is very important in terms of setting expectations. Let's talk about the key to success for stage 5, the maintenance stage. The first thing is continued growth and development. After the first few months of being in a program like this, you might feel like there's nothing wrong with you, and you might even find yourself tempted to take your foot off the gas or to take it easy. I know this might be impossible to imagine right now, but at this point, you have great habits in place. You're enjoying the lifestyle you've developed. You're proud of how far you've come, and you feel great about yourself as you begin to reflect on where you are right now in your reboot or in your recovery. And stage 5 is where the challenge of questioning your new path arises. You might wonder whether you still need to maintain certain boundaries, certain habits, or behaviors. And this is a very slippery slope to find yourself standing on. You have to remember that the positive things in your life are the result of the work you've done to remove porn and any out of control sexual behavior from your life. Remember, you put in a lot of work to get to this point. The key to success for stage 5 is actually quite simple. Continue your growth and development. Don't take your foot off the gas when you feel complacent and when you feel a little bit overconfident. These things creep in. Take a moment every time you can to look around and notice the incredible places that your life is going. Then remind yourself that it's going in this direction because you're no longer wrapped up in your behavior with pornography and masturbation. Another big threat is laziness. Yes, laziness. Now, there is a tendency as you gain control and start enjoying your life to take your reboot or your recovery for granted. And what happens with laziness is your boundaries start eroding slowly without you noticing. Maybe you stop being as intimate with your partner as you used to be, or you fall back on those quick dopamine hits like scrolling through social media, getting on dating sites, or binge watching Netflix. Cultivating awareness is a crucial part of stage 5. You must look out for those small threats to your reboots. Now, I'm not telling you that you have to be on high alert every time. There's nothing wrong with taking a small break here and there and enjoying these things. But when you find that you're spending more time in front of the screen or on dopamine inducing activities than working on your reboot capital, then there's a problem. Finally, settling into some sort of positive community that's supportive is very helpful. It could be a spiritual community, it could be a recovery community, it could even be a martial arts club. The important thing is that you have a community where you can consistently go to build key aspects of your reboot capital. So being supported, preferably by men who have been where you are or who are working actively on areas of reboot capital that have atrophied for them, is going to be very helpful at this stage of your reboot. So brother, if you've made it to this point, congratulations. I know that there was a lot to go through, but it's very important to preface your lifestyle with understanding what all the different stages are so that you can understand what's coming next. And at any point during your reboot, you feel a little bit lost, you're not sure if you're making progress, feel free to come back to one of these sessions to identify what stage that you're at. In the next module, module 2, we're going to be identifying several self-defeating behavioral and personality traits that I've noticed sabotage my clients' progress when it came to changing their reboot or recovery lifestyle. I like to say that changing your lifestyle when it comes to recovery is simple, but it's not easy. It's simple because everything is laid out for you. And as you've learned from my sharing the last few stages, you can always identify where you're at. However, it isn't easy because we all come with these thought or these inborn behavioral traits and personality traits that sometimes stand in the way. And so what we're going to do in the next module is I'm going to share these personality and behavioral traits with you. And together, we're going to identify the ones that could impact your reboot. I'll see you on the other side. Welcome to today's session. Today, we're going to be talking about self-defeating personality traits and behaviors. Self-defeating behaviors are ways of thinking and acting which have become habits. Over time, these habits have become who we are. They become part of our subconscious, and we automatically act them out. When ending an out-of-control sexual behavior, you change your habits before you can change your lifestyle. And this can sometimes cause you to relax a little bit because you fixed the problem of not consistently staying away from your problematic sexual behavior. However, your living problems attached to your lifestyle have not actually changed. So it's normal for us as human beings to enjoy our comfort zones. And after you've changed your habits and the tension caused by your addiction was relieved, you probably never saw the need to face these self-defeating behaviors. And thus they stay this way, holding you back in your ability to function in relationships and in various aspects of your life. There are 6 types of personality traits and behavioral patterns. And In reality, there are actually a few more, but for the purpose of this program, I will generalize and focus on the extremes of this behavior to ensure that you can identify yourself within them. The first type is what we call caretakers. A caretaker's self-image is actually based on how much that they can do for other people. Unfortunately, due to this, they can never really learn how to take care of themselves because they are so focused on caring for others. And the others that they take care of then never really learn how to take responsibility for themselves. Caretakers will always find a way to make sure that there is someone dependent around them. And if they cannot find anyone dependent around them, they will make someone dependent on them. Now, often when a caretaker feels down, they feel that they're being used. But that's actually because the caretaker cannot be in a relationship with anyone who is independent. So you will often find a caretaker complaining about other people who use them instead of asking, why do I find myself in this particular situation all the time? Who you are in a relationship says as much about you as it does the other person. The solution to stop being a caretaker is to allow others to start taking responsibility for their own actions and stop playing God. The next personality trait or behavioral trait is what we call people pleasers. Now, people pleasers base their self-esteem on never making anyone angry because they fear being rejected and they fear being alone. And people pleasers struggle with finding satisfying relationships because of a habit of lying. You may think about lying. Yeah. When a people pleaser is asked by, let's say, their spouse, right, how they're doing, their answer is always, I'm fine, I'm doing good, I'm okay, even if they're very upset or even if they're depressed. But a people pleaser isn't fine because he or she doesn't get what they need, and they don't get it because they don't ask for it. And then the other person in their life doesn't know. So they often hope and pray that the other person will somehow magically know what they want. As a result, people pleasers are constantly in a state of emotional starvation, so to speak. Unfortunately, since behavioral habits usually create behavioral patterns, people pleasers often end up with abusive individuals. And if you don't claim your rights, you will certainly cross paths with those who are willing to take your rights away from you. And over the years, I've seen many male clients who are people pleasers, even though in the boardroom or at their job, they are leaders and they seem to not be people pleasers. I've often seen them in relationships with women who take advantage of them. The next personality trait or behavioral type is called martyrs. Now, martyrs believe that life is supposed to be a struggle. Nothing is ever enjoyable, nor do they experience pure joy. Martyrs actually need pain in their life to feel normal. They frequently sabotage relationships and other aspects of their life which are going well when they don't find pain. And if you truly believe something, you are likely to accomplish it. And since martyrs believe that life is supposed to be a struggle and you're always supposed to be sacrificing themselves, well, that's exactly what you'll get if you have this personality trait. Oftentimes, martyrs will end up in relationships with passive individuals, and this gives them an opportunity to complain that they have to make all the decisions and they have to do all the work. Of course, this is the very reason why the relationship was formed in the first place. So if you're a martyr personality type and you feel that you're always sacrificing something, this is something to be aware of. The next personality trait or behavioral type that's self-defeating is the workaholic. Now, workaholics base their self-esteem on activity. They find it very challenging to relax and they need to be busy to feel worthwhile. And they never cut themselves slack because their need to be busy actually overrides everything else. Some workaholics are actually martyrs as well, and they feel guilty when they are not busy. In a future session on this program, I'll talk about how this can actually negatively impact the social aspect of your reboot or your recovery. So when you're creating a reboot or recovery lifestyle, the goal for a workaholic is learning to feel worthwhile, even when you're not working, when you're just resting. The next self-defeating personality or behavioral traits is perfectionists. Now, for the perfectionist, as it sounds, nothing can ever be perfect. Perfectionists, therefore, can never truly be happy because perfectionists base their self-esteem on that which is absolutely unattainable. Perfectionist parents, for example, many people may have this experience. The type of parents who ask their children what happened with the B grade. So their kid comes home with 4 A's and 1 B's, and they're like, that's good, but you could have done better and got another A. And since imperfection is all around us, perfectionists never have to look far to find it, unfortunately. A perfectionist has trained themselves to be skilled at finding imperfection and then giving feedback on it, but most importantly, they allow it to control their life. A perfectionist who recovers from their out-of-control sexual behavior is still a perfectionist, and this neurotic behavior will affect their ability to be happy. And accepting that you are a perfectionist or that your perfectionist tendencies affect your happiness is the first step to changing your lifestyle if you have this sort of trait. Learning to live in peace in an imperfect world is the skill to develop, and allowing for flaws in yourself and others leads to an incredible amount of relief. The final type is the uncommitted. Now, this self-defeating personality trait and behavior, individuals who have it base their self-esteem on never making a full commitment to anything. So they are never emotionally committed, and you can never get a straight answer out of the uncommitted. So the uncommitted will usually have multiple relationships at the same time so that they can fall back on one when the others don't work. But secretly, they thrive on the risk of getting caught. Now, the uncommitted only builds relationships with people who allow them to stay uncommitted. So caretakers and people pleasers, those personality traits, those people are often in their lives. And the caretaker will often try to fix the uncommitted, while the people pleaser keeps trying to do things right, and it never works. So the uncommitted can often be worse at this trait once they end their out-of-control sexual behavior due to shame and guilt. Because guilt particularly can convince the uncommitted that if people knew about me and all the terrible things I've done, the terrible things I've watched and masturbated to and so on, they will know that I'm a terrible person and I can't let them know the real me. And so you stay uncommitted. Now, the lifestyle of the uncommitted changes once he learns to stand still. You can learn that commitment doesn't only imply some sort of confinement, but it also has and creates its own unique sort of freedom for you. Now, below this session, I've included an exercise to help you identify your specific personality traits and behavioral types. Remember, in this program, we are changing your lifestyle to a reboot lifestyle. And one of the things that stands in the way of changing your lifestyle is not being able to identify your specific personality traits, both its positives and its negatives. The moment you can identify it and begin making those changes, the rest of this program is going to be so much easier for you. I'll see you in the next session. Welcome to today's session. I believe and I found great success at applying a lifestyle perspective to creating a lifestyle that involves staying off pornography and masturbation. And it's about reconnecting with the 5 areas of your life which allow you to wake up each morning and face the day with joy and purpose. These areas of your life are the areas of mental, social, physical, emotional, and spiritual capital. Now, disconnection from any of these 5 is the reason for your compulsive behavior with pornography and masturbation. And reconnection is not only the path back to these areas of your life, but it's also the antidote to letting them go. The pain you experience in life, which you medicate, whether it's anxiety, loneliness, insecurity, stress, frustration, anger, and so on, exists because you are out of sync with these 5 areas. To stay away from your compulsive behavior with porn, sex, and masturbation for life, to rewire the brain without fear of ever returning to your former behavior, you must heal, nurture, develop, and keep all 5 areas in check with what I call reboot capital. I spoke about this earlier in the program, and here's a quick reminder for you. Just as a person starting a business needs capital, an abundance of funds to ensure that the business stays afloat in its early days, a man struggling to end his behavior with porn and masturbation addiction needs an abundance of internal and external resources in all 5 areas to ensure that the results of his reboot are maintained. When you deplete reboot or recovery capital or disconnect from any of the 5 areas, your system of living is thrown off balance and you quickly spiral towards a relapse. So you must become, in a sense, a gardener. You must learn to cultivate and nurture all 5 areas of your life with a well-balanced supply of nutrients, which is your reboot or recovery capital, if you plan to experience a great harvest. In our case, a positive and easy journey to freedom from pornography and beyond. Now, when all 5 areas are working together, you experience contentment, fulfillment, and balance in your life. However, we must always monitor and ensure that each area has sufficient reboot or recovery capital to use when times get tough. But this is important. There is something that can sabotage you. The one thing I've seen over and over again that gets in the way of living a well-balanced life free of porn and masturbation is arrogance. And listen to this, brother. Sometimes some men still think that they can heal on their own. So this causes them to become lazy and to stop monitoring their physical, emotional, social, mental, and their spiritual life. And because things perhaps may have been going very well for you, you begin to think that you can solve all these challenges on your own. This is very common in men who are recovering from an out-of-control sexual behavior, and you will hear me mention it a few times in this course. Your success in other areas of your life can blind you. I coach highly successful business owners, sales reps, financial planners, lawyers, pastors, executives, high-performing professionals who fall into this trap over and over again. You may have gone through some challenging situations to arrive at where you are, maybe in terms of your financial success, in terms of your career or your family life. And it's very hard to admit that the skill sets, the belief, the willpower that got you there is not enough to help you control this out of control behavior. So it's a blow to your ego. And often I'll have brothers who stay in the program for a couple of weeks, feel that they have control, and then they go on. They don't follow the system because their belief is that they can still do this on their own. And maybe you're one of those men who has been playing this losing game for years. Ask yourself, when I leave the program to do this on my own, what am I disconnecting from? My emotions, my social life and my relationships, my belief or my intellect, my humanity? Now, through some circumstance or influence, you're not able to deal with a real or imagined challenge. So instead of seeking support due to your ego, or perhaps in the past you had a bad experience where you sought support and it failed, it didn't work out, you've disconnected from these in exchange for something which can instead fill the void. And of course, the void is filled by pornography, masturbation, and your out-of-control sexual behavior, which brings about your shame and guilt. You cheated, lied, and manipulated those you loved and yourself. You disconnected from empathy, from kindness, and from your basic humanity to become selfish and self-absorbed. Your pain, your pleasure, your problems became your only concerns as a human being. Now, hearing this approach may be new to you, but ending this behavior is not linear. It doesn't end by sitting in a circle and confessing that you're a porn addict or following some 12-step group or giving up your self-reliance to a higher power. You have the right to a happy and porn-free life. And with a little help, you'll discover the inner capacity to transform into a better human being. Let's briefly talk about the types of reboot or recovery capital that needs to be built up in order for you to get there. The first is what we call physical reboot or recovery capital. And this really covers your health, nutrition, and sleep. The next is intellectual or mental capital. This includes recovery skills and knowledge. The next is emotional reboot capital, which covers your values, commitments, goodwill, self-love, and others. And then we have social capital, which is supportive relationships, intimacy, resources from other people, and culture. And finally, we have spiritual capital, which is your guiding principles, your moral compass, your sense of purpose, and spiritual centeredness. Those are the different aspects of your reboot capital. And over the next few sessions, I'm going to be diving into each of them individually. It doesn't matter which of them you think that you are good at. This often happens. I remember early in my reboot being taught about the different areas. And I thought of the physical area and I was like, I got this. Like I'm in great shape. How does this affect my sexual behavior? But my nutrition, and my sleep was horrible. I was shocked at how much it actually impacted my out of control behavior. So, my advice to you as you move on to the next sessions is to take each area of your reboot capital seriously and complete the videos and any worksheets which come with it. You might be surprised at how much some areas impact your life. I'll see you on the next session. Welcome to the session. Today we're going to be speaking about social reboot capital. Now, social reboot capital consists of activities which promote wellness within your family, your career, your finances, and other relationships. People are social creatures who usually need the comfort and support of healthy relationships with other people before they can truly feel good about themselves, which is one of the reasons why you'll hear me refer to relationships quite a bit in this lifestyle program. When we started getting caught up in our addictive behavior with porn, sex, or masturbation, we became part of this addictive culture, so to speak, that had its foundation in what I call shared addictive values. And recovery or rebooting is about moving into a new mental state, a new neighborhood, and new relationships that now have in it a culture of newly shared positive values, values which actually support your freedom from this out of control behavior while enhancing your well being. And it's really about building caring relationships with others and engaging in behaviors that actually promote social capital. So, this social element of your reboot or recovery also has a career and financial aspect, which is often overlooked. Career, meaningful work, and financial security are pillars to be sustained during recovery because they impact all areas of your social life. And this is what we tap into when we actually experience emergencies. So, for instance, when recovery capital has been depleted in other areas of your life, being financially secure becomes important when you're trying to build up these areas. So, for instance, joining a gym or getting a personal trainer, that costs money, right? Social and recreational activities, even taking time off to go on some spiritual retreat or working with a therapist. And while there are many things in recovery which don't cost money, financial stability still plays an important role in maintaining your reboot or your recovery. So in the next session, we're going to talk about exactly how to develop, but more importantly, balance both the social and financial aspects of your reboot capital. Welcome to the session. I remember early in my recovery realizing that the friends I had around me, while they were good people, they lived a lifestyle that could easily lead me to slip. Going to bars constantly, drinking every weekend and during the week, sometimes smoking weed and entertaining ourselves, that's basically what filled our weeks. I decided that I needed to change my social circle to one which had people who were living lives closer to my values. Eventually, you'll come to these realizations on your own. Growing up, there was a saying that went, "Make new friends, but keep the old. One is silver and the other gold." This could be helpful when finding new friends. We sometimes feel that making new friends means letting go of our old friends, our other friends, but that really isn't the case. You have a shared history, you have good memories with these friends, and loyalty is certainly hard to come by. But your recovery at this point in your life, at this season in your life, is a priority. So expanding your social circle prevents you from feeling as if you have limited options when it comes to rebooting. Sometimes, when recovering from your out of control sexual behavior, you might actually experience social anxiety. In fact, that's what happened to me. For many men, they medicate their social anxiety and fear of rejection with porn, sex, and masturbation. And I want to talk about that a little bit. Now, if you are in the situation where the prospect of making new friends seems challenging due to your social anxiety, that's absolutely fine. Over the years, I've helped hundreds of clients overcome their social anxiety and build new social circles. Now, bear in mind that I'm an introvert. And during my addiction, not only was I introverted, but I was completely isolated. And I found it very, very challenging to reach out to strangers. And over the years, I've taught men that one of the best ways to kill 2 or even 3 birds with one stone when it comes to reboot capital is to build up multiple areas of reboot capital simultaneously in a process I call reboot capital stacking. This is where groups and classes come in. Here's what I mean. It was actually a dance class which changed my life. I'm not a dancer, but during my reboots, an acquaintance invited me to a salsa class. And normally I'd never go to something like that on my own, but he invited me because he was nervous about going, so I went. Well, it turns out it wasn't a salsa class. It was a swing dance class, and my friend bailed on me. So I was stuck in this class for an hour with men and women learning how to dance swing. But by the end of the class, I had danced with a few girls as part of the learning process because we had to rotate partners. So guess what? I had interacted with more women in 1 hour than I had in the previous 2 years. And I also felt good because we had a really good instructor and I felt that I had learned something that day. So it felt really good to have some wins in my life, right? And finally, the music, the movements, and just that happy atmosphere released endorphins and created this sense of well-being within me. It was such a huge contrast to my life of living in front of a computer screen. So I started going back and eventually I became a regular. And when I started dating, I began to take dates there, including my current partner of over a decade, whose first date with me was a swing dance class. And I share this with you to emphasize that certain situations can speed up the development of reboot capital. So let's say you're dealing with social anxiety, and maybe you'd really like to get into a relationship, but you're not sure how to do so. And you also want to have an interesting life. Well, a dance class would build up the social and the physical aspect, give you something interesting in your life. Another example would be martial arts like boxing or Brazilian jiu-jitsu, which would build up the physical, social, mental, and emotional aspects of your reboots. Because trust me on this, when you get choked out or you get punched in the face while training, you learn to deal with some very strong and sometimes unfamiliar emotions, but it builds your confidence. Another example would be taking on a career or a side job which involves face-to-face selling, which increases your social reboot capital, your mental reboot capital, and also helps when it comes to your financial life. Personally, I spent my summers while I was in college selling door-to-door. Now, I didn't really enjoy it for the first couple of summers. One of the main reasons why I did it was that it was going to help me pay my way through college because, well, I was busy viewing pornography and acting out during the semester, so I had to retake some classes, which is unfortunate to share, but that was the reality of my life. The main reason why I actually did that was I really wanted to build up my ability to communicate with people. I wanted to build up my ability to be social and to be verbally fluent. And I had struggled with this for so many years because of shame and guilt, which just kept me isolated from other people. In the next session, I'm going to share an important warning about developing the social and financial aspects of your life to a very high level. I truly believe that everybody who is participating in this program has the ability to completely transform these areas of their life. But at the same time, when you get that power, it also comes with a lot of responsibility. And there are some situations that are very unique to men who are recovering from an out of control sexual behavior when it comes to these areas of your reboot capital. I'll see you on the next session. A quick word of warning. The social and financial domains of your life can sometimes be taken to an extreme. Oftentimes, we have a tendency to overcompensate in these areas. And I've noticed two traits in clients over the years, and honestly, one of them actually applied to me. The first is what we call the hard work hermit syndrome, and the other is what we call the unbalanced social butterfly syndrome. The hard work hermit, as the name implies, describes a person who has ended the out of control behavior and they've started working on the financial aspect of their life, but they end up working nonstop all day. And by the evening, they have no time or patience to interact with anyone, friends or family. While on the other hand, the unbalanced social butterfly describes someone who socializes at the cost of other aspects of their lives. And while socializing is absolutely normal and healthy, you may sometimes find that you're doing it to avoid other priorities, and this can become a pattern in your life. So the solution to this is finding a sweet spot, or what we call the Goldilocks zone. If you're not familiar with this story, it's the story about the little girl who found a house in the woods where 3 bears lived. And when she used things in their house, their beds, when she ate their porridge, One side was very extreme. It was either too hot, another one was too cold, but the one in the middle was a perfect temperature and delicious, and she ate it. When she tried to sleep in their beds, one bed was too hard, another one was too soft, but the one in the center was just perfect, and she slept well. Her name was Goldilocks, thus the Goldilocks zone, which is the zone of balance where everything feels just right. So strive to be mindful about your activities, your environment, and the people around you, especially when you socialize. So ask yourself, do you find yourself at happy hour with coworkers most days of the week? Or do you find yourself spending time with people who are living self-destructive lives and hurting your self-esteem? Some social situations can be very toxic to our recovery. On the other hand, if you find yourself working so much so that every day, at the end of the day, you're exhausted, you find that your short-term memory is struggling, you're forgetting a lot of tasks which are unrelated to work, and you find yourself being very irritable when you have to do other tasks that are unrelated to your work, such as chores and such as other errands you may have to run after work, then chances are you're pushing yourself a little bit too hard and you might be in the hardworking hermit zone. Before we end this session, I want to let you know that the social reboot capital area can be a little bit daunting to face, especially due to anxiety. But I want you to know that it's absolutely possible. I was one of the most isolated, introverted, and honestly socially unskilled people that I knew. I took steps to change this aspect of my life. Now, it did take time, but again, if you follow my advice, if you follow this system and you find yourself a group, preferably if you find something that you can stack different aspects of your reboot capital on, you're going to make so much progress. Also, if you've made it to this point in the program, I want you to know that you are doing great and you're well on the way to changing your lifestyle. I'll see you in the next session. Welcome to the session. Today we're going to be talking about physical reboot capital. Now, physical reboot capital refers to the physical body, including the brain. And usually the first casualty of an out-of-control sexual behavior is our biology. Now, when sex, porn, or masturbation becomes the focus of your life, it often becomes dominated by different triggers and cravings. Nutrition and sleep often suffer. And the former, which is nutrition, sometimes suffers due to a dependence on sugar and other dopamine-inducing food to handle triggers when sexual stimuli is not available. And the latter is often due to viewing pornography late into the night and constant exposure to blue light from screens and high cortisol levels at night, which keeps you awake. In the next session, I'm going to share the most effective way for you to maximize both your physical activity, your nutrition, and your sleep. And these three pillars are critical to managing this aspect of your reboot capital. Sometimes there's a tendency to take the physical aspect of your reboot capital for granted. This is usually because we have been trained to believe that our addiction is something that happens in our mind and in our body. And we feel that it's just a matter of willpower to change this aspect of our behavior. I'm here to tell you that while you can change it mentally and emotionally, if you want to live a life free of this behavior forever, or in control of this behavior for the rest of your life, you are going to have to change the physical aspect of your life. I'll see you on the next session. Welcome. In this session, we are going to be talking about physical activity. Now, physical activity is vital to our body and to our mental health. So we should aim for at least 30 minutes of moderate activity per day. And it doesn't matter what it is. It can be walking, running, weightlifting, yoga, swimming, whatever you choose, whatever you enjoy doing. Now, if you're not a person who is motivated to take physical exercise seriously, allow me to share a few benefits with you. Things like endurance exercises, like long distance running, doing exercises for many repetitions and sets, this enhances the ability of the brain and body to work for longer periods of time. High intensity exercise also improves brain function by oxygenating the brain and delivering more nutrients to neurons. Remember, your brain is rewiring and neurons are an important part of this process. Exercise also releases endorphins, which are the body's painkillers. So endorphins are naturally produced hormones which medicate the pain, which you were formerly medicating with pornography and masturbation. So it creates something else that you can use to deal with your pain. So they relieve pain and they create a feeling of well-being. Below this video, I'm going to share a worksheet and journal that's going to help you in developing this physical part of your reboot. Next, we're going to talk about nutrition. Welcome to the session. I want you to ask yourself this question. When you eat, are you nurturing your body or are you simply just eating to make yourself full for the moment? Are you aware of what you're actually eating? And are most of your meals from drive-thrus and convenience stores as opposed to being home-cooked meals? The truth is that we often don't give enough thought to what we put into our bodies, or we simply eat based on convenience. On the other hand, you may find yourself obsessing about food regularly and often trying to justify what you should indulge in or what you should restrict. Now, both of these approaches are out of balance when ending in out-of-control sexual behavior. The truth is that food is about nourishing your body, and of course, food is to be enjoyed. Every single cell in our body is powered by food. So it makes sense that we spend time and understand what we put into our body. Of course, there are some exceptions. Some medical conditions require special diets or restriction on certain food. And when it comes to substances, during the first few months of your reboot or recovery, it's recommended that you avoid alcohol or any sort of mind-altering substances, including products which contain THC or cannabis. Now, you might feel that this is something which helps you sleep better or it helps lubricate social situations. But in reality, all your brain needs is an extended period of unawareness while you are conscious due to you ingesting some mind-altering substance to slip back into your old destructive patterns. In my life, alcohol and THC products were really my Achilles heel. Despite how much progress I made, even if I went for a couple of weeks without engaging in my out-of-control behavior, any time I drank, I would have this natural tendency, especially when hanging out with acquaintances or when I was out in public due to my social anxiety, to drink enough to completely desensitize me to my anxiety. Unfortunately, while it helped me become a little bit social, it became a crutch. The only way I could be social was to be on alcohol. And the only way that I could relax in some cases and go to sleep was to ingest some sort of THC product or to smoke it. Unfortunately, every evening when I returned home after drinking, it was so natural for me to just act out, regardless of how well I had been doing. Unfortunately for me, it took many years to realize that it was alcohol and these mind-altering substances that were leading to my failure to end my out-of-control behavior at that stage that I was at. And I don't want you to have to wait that long. Below this video, I'm going to share a basic nutrition guide and a worksheet that you can use to track the nutrients that you put into your body. I think that you're going to find this very helpful when it comes to managing this area of your physical reboot capital. I'll see you on the next session. Scientists have discovered a revolutionary new treatment that makes you live longer. It enhances your memory, it makes you more creative, it even makes you look more attractive. It keeps you slim and it lowers your food cravings. It even protects you from cancer and dementia. It wards off colds and the flu. It lowers your risk of heart attack and stroke, not to mention diabetes. You'll even feel happier, less depressed, and less anxious. Are you interested in what it is? Well, it's called going to sleep. Now, in the United States, it's estimated that we get about 6 hours of sleep per night, and we struggle with getting 8.5 to 9 hours of uninterrupted sleep. Sleep can be challenging, whether you are struggling with a compulsive behavior or not. You know, sleep is very important. It's actually a key determinant in how good of a shape you are in physically, how much fat you store and where you store it, how good you are at making decisions, how productive you are, even how intelligent you are. Sleep has a huge impact on your hormones because if you don't get enough sleep, you increase cortisol, you decrease human growth hormone, which is required for repairing your brain when you sleep. You decrease testosterone, you decrease thyroid hormone, and you decrease leptin, a hormone that raises your metabolic rates and tells you when you're full. You also increase ghrelin, which is the hormone that tells you that I'm hungry. Lack of sleep also negatively impacts your gut microbes, which affects digestion and glucose tolerance. Lack of sleep also decreases your impulse control, which of course doesn't help with controlling your sexual behavior. On top of that, sleep also can cause you to lose muscle mass, and it can cause you to get injured. So your endurance drops by as much as 30% when you're not getting enough sleep. You're not able to metabolize oxygen. You're weaker. You don't clear metabolic waste from your body fast, and you have decreased reaction time. It also decreases your cognition, so it impairs your brain's ability to remember basic motor patterns when you are unconsciously competent. And this leads to injury if you're lifting weights or you're doing some sort of manual work. How about our emotions? What happens to your emotions without sleep? I'm sure you've read enough self-development books or paid enough attention in high school biology to know about the lizard brain, also known as the amygdala. And as it turns out, when you're sleep deprived, you perform like a drunk person. So it pretty much gives you the emotional stability of a drunk person as well. So the connection between the more logical part of your brain and the lizard part of your brain gets weaker with the less sleep you get. And you basically don't have the gas to put on the brakes on your lizard brain. So it doesn't inherently make you negative, but what it does is that it makes you prone to overreactivity. And this means that any little thing that would stress you, it just means the end of productivity. So if you find yourself getting stressed out and then suddenly giving up on a task, it's usually because you're not getting enough sleep. Sleep also impacts your intelligence, which is your ability to learn new things. And it also impacts your mental reboot capital. So the more you sleep, the more your brain clears out useless information from its short-term memory stores and moves useful information into your long-term memory stores. And if you don't sleep as much, you end up having horrible short-term memory while you're awake, on top of a decreased capacity to move information from short-term to long-term while you sleep. Not only that, but whatever you do manage to learn during a sleep-deprived state, it erodes away each night, even if you get a regular amount of sleep. So basically, your ability to store, learn, and recall information is cut almost in half with as little as 2 hours of sleep deprivation. So to drive this home, your ability to learn is even impaired with having good sleep. That is to say, you can sleep enough, but if your sleep is poor quality, you're still doomed to be learning challenged. In other words, if you don't sleep as much or as well as you could, you'll be dumber because of it. So where's the tipping point? Well, after 15 hours of being awake, your brain begins to fail. And after being awake for 19 hours, you're about as functional as a drunk person, but you actually have no idea that you're impaired. You might feel fine. After 7 hours of sleep for 10 nights in a row, you operate with the same capacity as if you've been awake for 24 hours. Remember, you're about as functional as a drunk after 19 hours. Now, I'm sure many of you routinely get 6 hours and consider that to be good. But you might be wondering, well, how can I tell when I am sleep deprived? The crazy thing is that you can't. After a matter of weeks of light sleep deprivation, and these are from studies out there, and this, if it compounds each night, you actually grow accustomed to feeling this bad. So your lower levels of energy, reduced performance, background levels of stress and irritability, this becomes your new normal. And this is why so many people think that they can operate at capacity with 6 hours or fewer. Your brain pretty much has blinders on. Now, keep in mind that this compounds over time. So not even binge sleeping on the weekends can repair these performance deficits. Below this video, I've included a cheat sheet which contains tips to help you sleep better. What is important to note is that not getting enough sleep impacts every single area of your reboot capital. So please go ahead, print it out, put it somewhere where you can see it often, and please adhere to it until you're getting quality sleep. I'll see you on the next session. I'm so excited that you've made it this far. This is a very important module. Today, we're going to be talking about your mental reboot capital. And this is your cognitive ability. It's comprised of your ability to think and reason and consists of our thoughts, our beliefs, and our values. It's the foundation upon which your recovery is built. Now, in living a life with an out-of-control behavior, your mind becomes hijacked by your behavior of preference, which is sex, porn, and masturbation. And this distorted your thinking capabilities. You could say that your recovery capital actually became depleted to the point that you are in this perpetual state of confusion. Your thinking became irrational and choices became limited. And when you couple this with values that are out of sync with reality, you can see the terrible personal, spiritual, social, and even legal problems in some cases that your compulsive behavior can cause. So some ways to build mental reboot capital are via improving your knowledge about your addictive behavior, which you're doing right now, challenging your distorted thinking patterns and beliefs, which we covered earlier on, and making continuous reality checks and adjusting your values. I found that reestablishing values is one of the quickest ways to rebuild mental reboot capital. It doesn't make you smarter or more intellectual, but it does provide you with a guide to developing every area of your reboot capital. So in the next session, we'll be covering reboot values and standards. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that sometimes you may feel overwhelmed or feel that certain aspects of the course are too challenging or even irrelevant. Please note that this is a normal part of the recovery process. Lack of motivation, your mind wandering, difficulty completing things, and a need for stimuli. I want you to acknowledge them when you experience that. Take a break if necessary, not to view porn or masturbate, and then return to the course. So if you're at this point in the course, you're still doing great. I'll see you on the next session. Welcome to the session. Today we're going to be talking about values and standards. Now, values are your important, long-lasting beliefs on certain issues. When you ask yourself, what's important in my life? Those are your values. Now, often values and principles are confused with each other, but values are actually the foundation of principles. Examples of values are integrity, generosity, and compassion. Principles, on the other hand, are indisputable, unchanging rules that are based on your values. An example of a principle would be the golden rule. You've probably heard that, which is treat others as they would wish to be treated. There's also another law called the law of non-contradiction. That would be an example. That simply means that two contradictory statements cannot be true at the same time. So for example, your iPhone cannot be on and off at the same time. On the other hand, standards are actions or behaviors which you have imposed on yourself alone, but these are based on your values and principles. So values come first. Now, when it comes to your reboot or recovery, your personal standards guide you on your path to freedom and happiness. Standards actually keep you from making wrong decisions when you're taken over by your very strong urges or when you are not thinking rationally. So if your reboot and happiness is, let's say it's a house, then your personal standards are the gate, the fence, and the alarm system. They are your security against any threats to your long-term goals. Now, during the course of your out-of-control behavior, you may have lost many of your standards, or honestly, you may not have any. So we're going to talk about developing them, but I'm going to start with rules for developing your personal standards. The first is that you must create your own standards, which you will abide by at all times. The second is your standards are not goals or objectives. Those are in the future. Your standards actually exist now. Next is that your standards cover all areas of your reboot capital, which are relevant at that point in your life, of course. Health, relationships, finance, social, spiritual, and so on. Your standards should also be very short and to the point when you're putting them out. Your standards should also be realistic. For example, saying something like, I will never have a child as a standard is not the best standard because you don't know what's going to happen in the future. Your standard should also be yours and yours alone, not your father's, not your religious leaders, not your mentors, not your wife's, not your girlfriend's. You and you alone are responsible for your life. Those are a couple of rules when it comes to setting your standards. Feel free to go back to this and go through them as you set your standards. Next, we're going to talk about how to begin to determine your values. Now, a copy of this particular exercise that I'm going to share with you and the questions I'm going to ask you is going to be included below this video. But basically, take a pen and paper and write the answers to these questions. The first is, what are 3 things that you spend your time on most during your waking hours? The next is, how do you spend your money? Chances are what you spend money on are the things you value. What part of your life is most organized? Again, the areas of our life we organize the best are the areas where we usually have the most value. What do you internally dialogue with yourself about the most? For example, if you internally dialogue about your lack of success, it's maybe in your finances or in your career, it's possible that you value that quite a bit. What do you speak about most in social situations? That's an easy one. What 3 items stand out in your personal and your professional space? And what do you do that doesn't cause you to run out of energy? What is it that you do that ends up energizing you? And finally, which parts of your life are most disciplined? And if you're feeling that you're not disciplined in any aspect of your life, you can replace that with, what areas of your life are you the most reliable in? And it might be based on what others say or just based on what you notice. So go ahead, put pen to paper, answer these questions, and by the end of the exercise, you should have a much clearer idea on the different things that you value in your life. Again, the reason why I focus on values and standards when it comes to the mental reboot aspect of your life is because we're not going to live forever. And chances are you've already wasted a lot of your time to your out of control behavior. So while there are different areas of your intellectual life that you could work on, instead of spending time trying to figure out what you need to work on mentally, when you spend the time to identify your values and your standards, you can focus on those things. Your values and your standards are going to help you identify the things that you should focus on that are going to have the most impact when it comes to your mental reboot capital. It's an exciting thing to finally have an idea of what your values and standards are. Often when I ask new clients what their values and standards are, they throw out things like just being a good person, not stealing, being a good father, being a good husband. There's nothing wrong with those things. But if you haven't put much thought into it, if you haven't sat down and defined them, then it's going to be very difficult for you to identify things like your purpose or your mission in life, or to have a good sense of direction after you've ended your out of control behavior. So again, I'm so excited that you've gotten to this part, and I'll see you on the next session. Welcome to the session. Today, we're going to be talking about emotional reboot capital. Now, emotional reboot capital is about feeling and experiencing life on a much deeper level. It's the part of us which seeks meaningful contact with others. Now, living in a porn, sex, or masturbation-induced lifestyle, you may have created distance between those you loved or people you valued. And most of the parts of your waking hours, which could have been spent with those people, were often spent on your favorite obsession, your addictive behavior. So over time, the truth became blurred or lost, and justifications were made. Remember, addiction requires some form of deception, so it is actually maintained by lying. And when you begin the recovery or reboot process, you may have no idea how to forgive yourself, or even how to seek forgiveness from those whom you've harmed or hurt while engaging in your out of control behavior. So in order to make progress in your reboot and recovery, you need to change your character. And this happens by changing your values and standards. So as you become better at confronting the man in the mirror, you begin to forgive yourself, and you begin to ask those whom you hurt for forgiveness. If this sounds a little bit too much for you to imagine at this point, don't worry about it. I'm going to walk you through the exact steps that you need to take in order to make this happen. So in the next session, we're going to speak a little bit about emotional maturity and emotional immaturity. Welcome to the session. The 2 foundational principles which greatly affect your recovery are emotional maturity and emotional immaturity. Most men who struggle with an out-of-control sexual behavior for years often have stunted emotional growth. So if your behavior began in your childhood or in your early teens, you are more likely to struggle with adverse adult cognitive disorders and social challenges. Even after recovery, you may still struggle with educational difficulties, slight memory impairments, apathy, concentration issues, and mood swings. Don't worry about that. All of those things can be dealt with. Next is emotional immaturity. People who are immature thinkers seem to remain stuck in their negative emotions, unable to move past them. So you may feel uncomfortable in your own skin and you find it hard to deal with the normal challenges of life. When faced with problems, you may become short-tempered and feel unable to cope. You may even develop what we call learned helplessness, which is a dependence on others because you do not believe that you have the power to affect positive change on your own. Now, there are some dangers to emotional immaturity, and they are, firstly, a likelihood to relapse back to old behavior due to a lack of recovery or reboot capital in this area, and struggling with interpersonal relationships as a result. So there's this difficulty being around certain members of your family or even friends because of these unreasonable expectations you might have for family members or friends. Also, there's loneliness and lack of intimacy. So you struggle to build new friendships and you suffer from an inability to face life on life's terms. And over time, you find it difficult to live in the moment and you end up choosing some sort of alternate lifestyle or you settle for less in life due to a lack of self-confidence. So when an emotionally immature person fails to develop positive or neutral ways of dealing with life's challenges, their whole world shrinks and a relapse can be quickly triggered. Opportunities, options, and creativity seem impossible or non-existent to the extent that revisiting old habits actually becomes your only option. And at this point, thinking errors are very common with emotionally immature men. So here are a few examples of some thinking errors. One would be, I feel like a failure, therefore I must be one. And that's self-pity. Or generalizing, when you say, you know what, everybody does it. Or minimizing, it's not a big deal, it's not a big thing. Or being what I call a jerk magnet. If I'm angry, then that person must have done something to make me angry. So you never take responsibility. It's always someone else. Or personalizing. You get a memo that is addressed to everybody in the company, but you feel that that memo was addressed to you. Or overgeneralizing. If you feel unattractive, you will tell yourself, well, because I feel unattractive, then, well, I must obviously be unattractive. Or obsessing, like, she didn't thank me for the congratulations card that I sent her. So what should I do now? Like, what does it mean? That's being obsessive. Or giving up on life. Like, what the heck, after all this time, I still watched porn. I still masturbated in the shower. You know what? I'm not going to be able to do this. I might as well just give up and live my life as an addict forever. Now, if you've ever caught yourself thinking this way, these are the thoughts of someone who has immature thinking behaviors. It's just a sign that you need to work on this aspect of your life. Now let's talk a little bit about the other side of this, emotional maturity. So emotional maturity refers to your ability to better understand and manage your emotions. Emotional maturity enables you to create the life you desire. And this means defining success on your own terms, not society's, and designing ways to achieve it. So when you are emotionally mature, you no longer need to numb the intensity of life's ups and downs. Here are a couple of traits of people who have emotional maturity. The first thing you notice is that you're no longer a victim to your emotions. And you also find it much easier to live in the moment and be present. And a lot of times you also have the ability to be of use to people who are in need. So when someone is struggling, you're able to help them. It's not something that's irritating and you don't find yourself overwhelmed. Another trait would be you struggle less with stress and any sort of stress-related illness. You find it easier to make friends and you can develop meaningful relationships. You're also optimistic about the future for the most part. And you do not struggle with mood swings and you feel balanced and secure, which is something a lot of men who struggle with an out of control sexual behavior deal with. You also have confidence that you can cope when life becomes tough. And I think that would be an awesome thing for all of us to have. You don't feel the need to use pornography or sexual behavior to escape or stabilize your emotions. You're basically able to regulate your own behavior. And finally, you're open to discussing a lot of concepts that other people might find to be a little bit triggering, things like spirituality or even politics. But most importantly, when you're emotionally mature, you are willing to forgive others. Now, while there are many emotions involved when it comes to managing your out of control behavior and creating a new lifestyle with strong emotional reboot capital, one of the primary emotions that men who are ending this behavior struggle with is anger. And that's what we're going to be discussing in the next session. Welcome to the session. Today, we're going to be talking about the elephant in the room, the big emotion that most men dealing with this behavior face, and that's anger. Anger is one of the most common emotions that men who are struggling with an out of control sexual behavior suffer from. Often therapists will teach men to let out their anger as long as they learn to manage it. And that might be true, but early in your reboot or your recovery, it sometimes feels like teaching a child how to handle a hand grenade. If you experience a lot of anger, I want you to know that there's nothing wrong with you. Anger is a normal experience that we encounter occasionally as we move through the various stages of our reboot. And you are not to blame for your anger during these periods of transition. You're not a bad person because you're always walking around angry and on the verge of a relapse. Anger and relapse are actually cousins, and they must be addressed together if you intend on successfully recovering. Let's talk about a few causes of anger. So anger and the frustration which comes with it are considered to be some of the most powerful relapse triggers, right after fear, shame, and doubt. And many men who are ending their out of control sexual behavior experience anger issues which they never experienced before their addiction, and they don't understand why. So the reason is that you may have failed to address anger issues earlier in life because you either repressed or suppressed it. Repression is involuntarily pushing down an emotion, while suppression is doing it consciously. Anger is an emotion. Like any other emotion, like hate, love, or joy, it is neither good nor bad. What actually makes anger good or bad is the way we handle it. So understand that anger is an emotion which we've actually trusted from when we were a child. No matter how it was caused, we rarely develop the power to break away from it. Often when progressing through the different stages of your reboot, you will deal with anger in overt and covert ways. For instance, you may become overly aggressive and use verbal and physical methods to release your frustration. Now, when you add other internal challenges such as shame, guilt, depression, burnout, loneliness, paranoia about your sexual behavior being exposed, frustration, and an inability to cope with real-world challenges such as dealing with people who don't empathize with your issues, or financial struggles, or family issues, or time management problems, it's no wonder that relapses are so common during your recovery. So some of the main causes of anger are irrational beliefs, which are basically things which your family and environment taught you, which you now rely on for guidance. And then we also have what is called maladaptive thoughts. So this is cognitive dissonance, where your actual outward facial appearance and body language does not match your thoughts or the comments that you are giving. Next, we have unrealistic expectations. These are unmet needs and expectations. And this sort of thinking usually involves words such as, they or I should, or they or I shouldn't. That means you're expecting others to behave in the same way that we were taught to. And that often leads to disappointment and conflict when our expectations are unmet. Next, we have fear. So fear and anger are related. Anger can often be the mask which covers up your pain. And it's quite common to struggle with fear quickly followed by anger when recovering or rebooting. And the early stage of your reboot can be an emotional roller coaster with very big highs and deep lows. So for years, you may have medicated or anesthetized your emotions with the neurochemicals involved in your sexual addiction, but now you've suddenly awakened. Let's talk about a few ways to avoid anger. The first way is regular exercise, and this is an effective way to release pent-up frustrations through the release of endorphins. The next way is when encountering someone who triggers your anger response, try and go for a long walk rather than confronting them right away. You can also concentrate on your breathing, or you can count down from 10. Next, we have mindfulness meditation, and this can be very beneficial in helping men who are rebooting to manage their emotions, especially the emotion of anger. Mindfulness meditation is also very beneficial in helping men who are rebooting to manage their emotion. So this allows you to understand your emotion a little bit better, and it also helps you dissociate from your feelings of anger. Now, one of the easiest ways to learn meditation, especially if you are not familiar with it, is to use an app. Now, there are lots of apps out there. Two of the apps which have been used to great success by many of my clients are Omvana, Omvana, and the app called Headspace. So check them out and begin to use them on a daily basis. 10 minutes is just fine to build the habit of meditation and learn how to dissociate from your emotions. Below this video, I've included an anger evaluation exercise to help you understand the extent of your anger issues and deal with them better. I'll see you on the next session. Welcome to the session. Today we're going to talk about a forgotten skill. And I've saved what I consider to be the best and also the hardest for last. That skill is forgiveness. Now, you've already looked at your addictive behavior directly in the eye. You faced it, and you're right here going through the process of changing your lifestyle. However, despite everything, there's quite a bit of work left. And a key element of this is forgiveness. If you take a moment to recall the worst times of your life with your out-of-control sexual behavior, you probably said and did many things which caused harm to others and resulted in emotional, physical, financial, or psychological damage. Perhaps you even permanently damaged a relationship which was important to you. So let's talk about resentment for a moment. Are you harboring a grudge over certain things that were said or actions you took which you found to be inappropriate or unfair? You probably are. However, holding on to resentment won't do you any good and can very well stall your recovery or your reboot. Brother, it is time to let go of all that baggage. In recovery, we begin by forgiving ourselves first and then others. Religions and spiritual traditions from all over the world hold forgiveness in high regard, and in some cases even require it to achieve a state of high spiritual attainment. There is a good reason for this. Forgiveness enables you to let go of many pent-up emotions which stand in between you and your true self. And it not only restores your relationship with yourself, but also your relationship with others. I want to make it clear that the ability to forgive is a state of mind which anyone can achieve. However, it doesn't come easy. It has to be practiced. So don't worry if you are unable to forgive at this point, or if others whom you hurt are unable to forgive you. There are different stages of emotional development in life, and forgiveness is actually highly dependent on the individual's level of emotional maturity. So as you progress through the different stages of your reboot, you will get better at your ability to forgive. So be patient. In the meantime, I'll leave you with a few tips to begin the process. The first is practice letting go of your resentment. Next is build a habit of not being hard on yourself, which you'll be doing quite naturally as you go through this program. Next is let the other person that you hurt, let them off the hook first. So don't expect an apology from them before you will forgive them. And remember that forgiveness, it's not for you, it's for them. Before seeking forgiveness, make sure that you clean up any messes you've made. So if there's some logistical issues, some things that you haven't fixed in the world that caused that situation, fix that first, then ask for forgiveness. Next is trust the forgiveness process. A lot of times we feel that nothing good is going to come out of forgiveness. It doesn't matter whether anything good or what you expect comes out from it. What matters is that you let those emotions go. Remember that you relapse emotionally long before you actually relapse physically. And so your lack of forgiveness often has something to do with your physical relapse. Finally, whenever you're seeking forgiveness or you're going through the process, try and do it face to face. In recent years, I've seen so many people resort to texting or emailing in order to apologize and in order to go through the forgiveness process. It is best done face to face when you can actually see the person. Please do not resort to texting for forgiveness. That's the easy way out. And sometimes it can end up not bringing about the solution that you desire. Congratulations, you just made it through the emotional reboot capital session. This is often a challenging session to go through because most men often realize how much work that they actually have to do. And I just want to end this by assuring you that going from emotional immaturity to emotional maturity is a very fulfilling experience. And you may not see it now, but it's going to open up your life to so many opportunities. If you're trying to fix a relationship, if you're trying to build intimacy, if you are trying to build relationships with other people to enrich your life, going through this process, becoming more emotionally mature, identifying the things that are holding you back, dealing with your anger, and forgiving others is going to be absolutely transformative. And I'm proud of you for beginning this journey and changing this aspect of your lifestyle. I'll see you on the next session. Welcome to the session. Today we're going to speak about spiritual reboot capital. Now, some people might get nervous when they hear the word spiritual, especially when it's associated with a program which is meant to help you end a compulsive behavior. Now, it means different things to different people. So right off the bat, I'd like to clarify what spiritual reboot capital is not so that there is no confusion. Spiritual reboot capital is not about being religious or believing in a higher power or engaging in any strange esoteric practices. These all have their place in our lives depending on your beliefs, but I found that they are not necessary to freedom from a sexually compulsive behavior. Now, if you consider the other aspects of reboot capital, physical, mental, social, and emotional capital to be tires, the 4 tires on the vehicle of your reboots, the spiritual aspect would actually be the steering wheel. And don't let that scare you. It resides in the center. It's what steers us in the right direction, very much like a moral compass. It is, or it should be, a part of who we are. It is that place which extends beyond time and space, the who am I and why am I here part of our life. Like I mentioned earlier, it's not necessarily a religion, but it can be. Basically, it is something within us that says that we are a small part of something greater than us, that we belong. So while living a lifestyle characterized by compulsive sexual behavior, you become disconnected from this part of your existence, and you soon lose the ability to find purpose in your life. Essentially, without this compass, you continuously make poor choices, which soon veers you off the path, and you wind up in the proverbial ditch. I'm not a religious person, and at a certain point in my recovery, in a moment of clarity, I realized something. There are only 2 certainties in life: that you will die one day, and that in between birth and death, you will experience tragedy. In a decade of coaching men to freedom from this behavior, I found that the ultimate triumph is accepting the reality of death and meeting the tragic aspects of your life head on. Emotional, mental, social, and physical capital are not enough for this. When nothing and no one comes to save you, when all that you thought you believed in fails you, but you nonetheless have no choice but to go through the tragic experience, only the development of spiritual reboot capital can guide you through navigating these 2 certainties of death and tragedy. One of the easiest ways to build spiritual reboot capital, if this is a foreign concept to you, is to begin by consciously deciding to perform acts of kindness on a regular basis. I'm all about the easiest way to get to your goal when rebooting, and this is the easiest and simple way to start feeling a connection between strangers, others, and yourself, especially if your behavior has numbed you to many emotions. For many, spirituality provides hope, a source of support, comfort during difficult times, and a sense of peace and understanding. It is discovering the power of being spiritually grounded that can change isolation and self-pity into a newfound peace. Spiritual capital is about regaining or rebuilding our moral character through the practice of humility, tolerance, forgiveness, responsibility, harmony, and concern for others. And my clients who incorporated spiritual capital into their reboots recovered faster and slipped and relapsed much less. By building recovery capital in the spiritual area, you learn to risk a little, discover an inner path, and try performing little acts of kindness and have that be all right, because the response from these acts alone are going to start making you feel good internally. In the next session, I'm going to talk about the importance of transforming your suffering. Because as you go through this process, whether it is changing your habits, your lifestyle, and eventually your self-image, which is the end goal of this entire process, you will go through a significant amount of pain in different areas of your life. And I want to show you a way to deal with that. Welcome to the session. Today we're going to talk about transforming your pain. Many people carry pain with them throughout the recovery process. And I don't want to ever insinuate or make someone feel that going through these programs is going to somehow eliminate the suffering and the pain that you might experience. It doesn't matter whether you're going through this course, working with a therapist, going through a religious program, going through a 12-step program, or if you're even in rehab. None of that is going to eliminate the reality of some form of pain and suffering from your life. So I'd like to close off this particular session on spiritual reboot capital by talking about the very important mindset that my most successful clients have when they are dealing with the reality of suffering. Your long-term success when it comes to rebooting is dependent on a certain characteristic. And that characteristic is your ability to transform your suffering and your pain into meaning. Why is this? Well, as you progress through the system, experiencing the highs of consistency and the lows of unexpected slips brought about by sometimes taking your reboot or recovery for granted, you will finally arrive at a point where you realize that this process matters. And you're going to have to confront that voice which will say, can you really do this? And it matters. Confronting it matters. Boldly facing the deep fear which whispers, oh, what if you never end this behavior? What if none of this works and you live with this forever? It matters. Confronting it matters. Rejecting the embrace of the dark, terrible horror which rises from the depth of your soul when you relapse after many months or even years. That voice, how could I let this happen after I put in so much work? How could I slip? How could I fall off the train? It matters. Now, in my journey, I came to realize that these experiences, these were not bad. These were not evil, as horrible as they sometimes seem. Like fear, the terror of a lifetime of bondage to this behavior, the deep sadness of contemplating my helplessness, the shame which you feel like can never be showered or slept off, the actions which I took, which you took, which we felt that we could never forgive ourselves for. You know what I mean. I stopped fighting them when I realized that they were simply human experiences. Everybody has their struggles. We are just those who chose or are forced by circumstance to confront ours. This alone is a reason to reject shame. When I observed these experiences and understood their nature, to my surprise, they filled the holes which they created with something even greater than they had taken. And that thing was meaning. All your pain, all your suffering, brother, it must be transformed to meaning. If you do not retain anything from this program, please retain this. It's a quality unique to human beings, the ability to use emotional pain as a tool for your personal evolution. This is what it means to have a human experience. It's just some of the cards that we've been dealt on this journey. How we play them sets the stage for how rich and fulfilling the rest of our journey in this body on this planet will be. When I say meaning, it's not cookie cutter. Meaning is not the same for every man. Life is a beautiful thing. I think life can be art. The meaning which is created from your suffering will be unique to you. Every bit of meaning you pull from your suffering are brush strokes on a canvas of infinite possibility. And to be honest with you, one of my selfish joys as a coach and a mentor in this field is watching you paint, is watching you create something within you which was never there. So brother, I want you to know that your suffering, which seems so unbearable, your journey, which seems so long and filled with setbacks, your long night, which shows no promise of a breaking dawn, brother, it matters. Maybe to you, perhaps to your wife, your child or future children, your mission in life, whatever may come from it. Brother, it simply must have meaning. Here we are, gentlemen. We are finally at the end of this lifestyle journey. And today I'm going to share some of the common pitfalls that a lot of men fall into on this journey. Have you ever found yourself worrying about finally gaining control of your behavior with porn and masturbation, only to relapse within a year or within a few weeks? Or have you given yourself the excuse that, you know what, there's no point in trying to recover or reboot because I'm probably going to relapse anyway? Well, over the past couple of years, I've had a handful of clients, to be absolutely honest with you, who did relapse within their first year. And this was after gaining control of their urges and their obsessive sexual thoughts, and even after they overcame their fear of relapse. So yes, I have clients who relapse. I am the best at what I do, but I'm no magician. The truth is that you are the best expert on yourself. My job is to guide you towards self-mastery. Now, some clients get on calls with me and they ask something which you might be wondering at this point in this course. JK, what is the guarantee that I'll never engage in this behavior again, that I'll never compulsively masturbate, that I'll never view pornography again? My response is always the same. I was like, the only guarantee is that you stick to the system and you don't do any of the 5 things that I'm going to share with you. This is what we're going to close out with. The 5 reasons why men relapse in the first year of rebooting or recovery. The first is a desire to put it behind you. And this is when you don't want to spend the time, the 2 years or even the months building new habits or changing your lifestyle and rewiring your brain. All you want is to simply get it over with and have a normal life. Never mind the fact that your addiction or your compulsive habit lasted for years. No, you want to end it as quickly as possible. And it's understandable. I get it. Right? Like porn and your out of control sexual behavior is a negative part of your life. And honestly, any sane man who sees a way out of an addiction will give it a shot. But the problem is hope. So after many months or years, you've regained hope that you'll live a fulfilling and peaceful life. And that hope can sometimes cause you to rush ahead in the process. But this is a process that cannot be rushed. What often happens is that most men who feel this way get to a point where they are no longer watching porn or masturbating, and then they drop their accountability partners, they stop watching the courses, they stop speaking to their therapist or coach. They wonder, like, what's the point, right? The program has done what it promised, right? I rarely have urges to masturbate, and when I do, I can control them, and I have 0 urges to even watch pornography. But you forget that recovery or rebooting is not a straight line. It takes 1.5 years to 2 years for your brain to fully rewire from this out of control behavior. So letting go of things like accountability, letting go of the tools, letting go of your coaches, when you do that before this time period is up, that leads to a relapse. The second reason why men relapse within the first year is you stop focusing on self-care. Now, many men who experience 90 to maybe even 120 days free of pornography and masturbation are thrilled with their newfound mental freedom. So I've noticed that they proceed to take action in the different areas of life where porn has robbed them of different things. We spoke about reboot capital. So they start dating again. They start having sex more often with their wives. There's more intimacy. They start taking action on those business ideas which had laid stagnant for a while. But then the excuses begin. I've got to get some work done on my new business before I go to my regular jobs. I'm just going to skip my morning recovery routine this morning. Or I had a very stressful day, and I choose to deal with it by binge watching Netflix and eating junk food. This is my way of rewarding myself. Well, at least I didn't watch porn. Less sleep, more entertainment, less healthy eating, less taking care of your mind. And then making up for lost time often becomes the cause of your next relapse. The third reason why men relapse during their first year is that you feel like you are not learning anything new. The truth is, once you've implemented, and the key word there is implemented, the basics of rebooting or recovery, it's more or less smooth sailing for a few months until you reach the next stage of your reboot or your recovery. Unfortunately, some men begin to lose interest and they feel that recovery and rebooting is a drag. They begin to feel that it's some sort of obligation. So you begin to show up less and less to see your coach or your therapist. You begin to watch the course less and use the worksheets less. When you show up less, your awareness of your addiction drops. And when it drops, you slowly lose that ability to recognize your addict voice. That voice which tells you, you know what? Just watching one more time won't hurt. Remember, as you go through this program, if you feel a little bit bored, one of the sayings that I tell my clients is, you need to be reminded more than you need to be taught. There's nothing new to learn. You have everything that you need right here. All you need to do is remind yourself. The fourth reason why men end up relapsing in their first year is being embarrassed of your constant struggle. And this means that at a certain point, maybe a part of you feels that you should be beyond the basics. And you begin to feel shame when you experience strong urges and you find yourself still entertaining thoughts which you felt were dealt with months ago. So shame and pride prevent you from actually reaching out for help. So some of the thoughts you might have are like, you know what, I can't believe that as a grown man, even going through this course, I'm still experiencing these strong urges. Like, it's been months. Everyone will probably think I'm weak or I'm still secretly watching pornography. Please be aware of this. It takes 1.5 to 2 years to control this behavior. And during that time, if you feel urges, it is absolutely normal. There's nothing wrong with you and there's no shame in asking for help. The fifth and final reason why men end up relapsing in their first year of recovery or rebooting is when you think that you have a very deep understanding of your behavior in a short period of time. So I often receive messages from men who are seeking some sort of tip, which usually begins with them listing out all the therapy that they've been through or the length of time that they've been on streaks of not acting out and all the books that they've read about addiction and neuroscience and so on. But curiously, they're still relapsing, and I can tell by the messages they send me that they're actually trying to minimize the actual extent of their relapse, which is fine. It's understandable why they do that. But a similar phenomenon occurs in men who gain a lot of internal and external knowledge during their first year of rebooting. Some men even get so excited that I've seen them run off and try to become coaches themselves, simply because they've been off pornography for about 6-7 months. But remember, from earlier on in this course, that the reboot process occurs in stages. Your journey is not over till you can hit that 2-year mark. It's definitely easier once you get to 90 days with the system. You feel a lot more confident, but it's far from over. What got you to your first year is not the same thing that's going to get you to the second year. That's why many men have become a part of our group coaching program, even after staying off pornography for a full year. They can't afford to relapse as they go into their second year. Listen up, brothers. There's a whole bunch of knowledge out there. There's knowledge of your past, of root causes via different therapeutic modalities. There's knowledge about your addiction. And then there's rebooting, the oftentimes painful process of transforming your biochemistry, regulating your environment, building relationships via community, learning to rebuild intimacy, and developing powerful, effective coping skills for your pain and even your trauma. In conclusion, brother, to make the most of everything that you've learned on this journey, don't fall victim to any of these 5 pitfalls in your first year. Remain vigilant. Now, it's not my intention to make rebooting or recovery sound like some insurmountable journey, because it truly isn't. My aim is to shed light on a severely misunderstood behavior. You are in a battle with an enemy which is as cunning and as smart as you are, because it's a part of you. And this may well be the most memorable internal journey of your life. Don't fear it, don't deny it. As I tell my clients, during the weeks when your urges are strongest, when you wake up each morning, let your first thought be, come get me. Say that to your addict, a challenge to your weaknesses, your addict, your mediocrity. That little voice in your head telling you to hit the snooze button, to leave the gym early, to slack off, to skip a worksheet. Face it, use the tools, learn from your slips and relapses, increase your knowledge, and keep moving forward. I assure you, you will surely win this battle. I'm JK, your brother in this struggle, and I want to thank you again for taking the time to go through this course. It doesn't end right here. It's actually designed to be used as a piece of reference material. So for instance, as you progress through your different stages, as you move from stage 1 to stage 2, as you move from the late reboot to the maintenance stage, come back, watch the videos, revisit some of the worksheets that you've completed so that you always know where you are on the map of your recovery and reboot.